Good afternoon. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. As Deidre has already said, my name is. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, Johannes, we can hear you nice and loud and clear.
Okay, sorry, because I thought there was an interference, external interference of noise. Okay, so I'm an academic writing tutor with the University of East London. So on the screen there, you can see those are my details, my email, just in case you want to get further support after this session. And below is the academic tutoring team email, just in case you also want to reach out to us, or if you are not able to get in touch with me, you can always email the academic tutoring team. They will be able to attend to your query. Right. So today we will be looking at how to structure essays, reference into how to critically analyze the ideas that we use in responding to essay questions. I'm not able to move my slides forward. If you can go to the next slide, Chloe, I will be grateful.
You have the control, so it won't let me move it now unless you want me to cancel that.
Yeah, my controls are not allowing me.
Okay,
Sure.
I can
Because
do that.
when I switched on to my laptop, I seem to have lost
Yes,
control.
okay. I can do it from my end here anyway. I'll just go into that. Yeah.
Right. So yeah. So we'll start by looking at the session objectives. So our session objectives are that at the end of this session, we would have discussed approaches to structure essays and how to write coherent ideas. Therefore, at the end, we expect you to be aware of frameworks that you can use to structure your paragraphs, to structure the whole essay, and how you can glue together your ideas to make sure that your readers can follow your ideas easily. And we also going to look at how we can critically evaluate the arguments that we advance in the essays, and how we can then reach well-considered positions that are backed by evidence. And lastly, we want to also be able to reference the sources using the Harvard system. As you will see, there are some technical areas where you might get confused with how to reference, for example, where a source is written by a number of writers, or it is an edited book where you have each writer writing a different chapter. There are also issues like how do you secondary reference. So we are going to discuss all these in this session. If we can go to the next slide. Right. So in this slide, you can see I've given an example of a typical essay that you can encounter at level 6 and 7. So this essay question is a 5,000 word essay that asks you to evaluate and discuss different descriptions and understanding of autism, incorporating different models of disability into the analysis. It further goes on to say, as part of your discussion, you should consider the impact of these different models of autism. Yeah, part of the text is just covered by
Okay. Yeah, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
by
I'm not sure why it's doing that now.
yeah, but it's covered by the participant. Okay, let me right. So right. So as part of the discussion, you should consider the impact of these different, it should be models of autism on how autistic children, young people are supported in schools. Right. So as you can see, this is an essay that requires you to do a number of things. You are being asked a number of issues. So it requires you to be systematic in how you interpret the essay question, because here there's potential to go off topic because it asks a number of things, and you might focus on a section that is very critical because it talks about autism, it talks of models of disability, it also talks of the impact of the different understandings of autism right now. So when you are confronted with such a question, the first task that you need to do is to break down the essay into three different parts. So the three different parts are the subjects, the restrictions, and instructions. And in the next slide, we are going to look at each of these aspects. What do they mean and how do they help us to interpret essay question? So when we talk of subjects, this is about the overall topic of the essay. What is the essay about? Now, looking at the previous question, or reflecting on the previous question that we looked at, what do you think this essay is about? Any responses? Right. Okay. So this essay overall is about autism. Right. If we can go to the next slide, and the next issue we need to tackle is, yes, we know this essay is about autism, but then we cannot just go on and write anything on autism. So we need to break down through focusing on restriction. What is the specific context or aspect that we need to be looking at when we are writing this essay? And if, Deidre, if you can go back to the essay again. Right. So looking at that essay, what do you think are the specific things that we need to be focusing on?
I think maybe we can focus on an understanding of autism and
Yes, sorry,
different
the different understandings of autism, yes.
and different
Great.
descriptions of autism on how
Yeah.
autistic children are supported in school.
Yeah, great. So those are the two specifications that we need to be looking at. So in answering this question, specifically, we need to be highlighting what are the different understandings of autism. For example, autism might be understood from a medical model. It may be understood from a social model, or it might be understood from a biopsychosocial model. That means a combination of these two models. Now, the last thing that we need to look at is the instructions, right? Having narrowed down our essay to specific things that we need to do, what do we do with that? We need to, so instructions tell us what we need to do. In this particular case, it is to critically discuss. Right, now you might be wondering, what does the word critically, what do the words critically discuss mean? And in the next slide, I've put some definitions of, right, so, right. So those are the different definitions of words that are traditionally used in asking essay questions, right? So discuss, criticize. So critically discuss. A discussion here means an investigation of an issue in detail. You do this by sifting arguments for or against a particular aspect of that issue. You examine the implications. Now, that's discussion. What about critically discussing? Criticize here means to give a judgment about the merits or demerits of particular theories, or about the truth or falsehood of a given issue. You are supporting your arguments with evidence, and giving forward reasons to reach a certain conclusion. So when we put together what we can, the sum total of these two definitions means that when we are now looking at autism, looking at the different understandings of autism, we then try to look at what do each of these models say. Say we are looking at the medical model. We are looking at what are the strengths of the medical model. How is viewing a particular issue using what are the limitations of viewing an issue using a medical model? And if using a medical model is limitations or is its own weaknesses, what are the alternatives model, or what are the alternative models? And these alternative models, do their merits overshadow the weaknesses of the medical model to make it inappropriate in applying or in assessing or working with young people with autism? So these are the decisions that we need to be making when we are discussing and criticizing. We need to be looking at applying this framework and applying these definitions to come up with clear lines of argument. So when we are critically discussing, a discussion is generally an argument. But then as we do as we engage in these arguments, we are also critically looking at them. What are their limitations and their strengths? If we can go on to the next slides. Right, now, the initial point, having analyzed the question, broken it down, what we need now is to plan. And in the planning process, of course, we have included the analysis of the question, which we have already discussed. Now, the next step is to find and organize the relevant material. Now, when we are looking for the materials, we might need to look at different sources. The starting point could be the use of standard textbooks. Textbooks are useful in the sense that they give a chronology of how a certain theme is developed, or how a certain concept develops, because textbooks are organized using topics and subtopics, and these normally are organized in such a way that the concept are written in a chronological manner and clearly related to each other. Therefore, to get an overall understanding of a particular topic, it might be useful in starting your research using textbooks. However, when you want then to go into details of a particular theme, trying to know more about that theme, what else can you read? Any response apart from textbooks?
Articles online.
Articles online, yes, good. You can look for specialized articles online, and you can also look at journal articles. These are normally very useful because the journal articles are more specialized on different aspects of a particular topic. For example, you might want to go and search for articles that deal with or that critique the medical model. Or you might want to look at articles that look at the social model. So these articles will generally go more in depth on a single theme, and because they go more in depth, you are likely to get some useful ideas on critically analyzing particular strands or particular aspects of your essay. So as you research, say you start with the medical model, you might want to briefly find out what does the medical model involve, right? Then you might want to look at what are the strengths of the medical model. And as you write each of the strengths, try to find who are the writers that talk about the strengths of the medical model. What do they identify as the strengths? Are they agreed on these strengths? If there are differences in opinions, we need to know what these differences are. Then you might want to go on to the weakness. Again, find who are the writers that write about the limitations of the medical model. And you do the same with the social model. So as you gather your notes, look at what are the key arguments, who are the writers, and these items will help you construct a critical argument when you start writing your essay. So now, having gathered the relevant material, the relevant notes, you can now begin planning, making a plan for your essay. Which ideas are the most useful at the organization stage or at the reading stage? You might have come with all sorts of different ideas, but these need reorganization. Which are the most important? So start with your most your strong arguments, followed by the weaker ones. So you might want to, when confronted with an essay like the discussion of different understanding of autism, maybe start with the medical model, because traditionally it has been the dominant model, although its influence is weakening because it has been challenged by other models as well. So you might start by situating your argument by talking about the medical model. What are the limitations? What led to its declining influence, and those models that are becoming more popular, why are they popular? But then even if they are popular in challenging the medical model, they may have their own limitations as well, and we want to know those limitations. So at the planning stage draft, in a 5,000 word essay, you have your introduction, which summarizes the main issues that you are going to talk about. Then the main paragraphs, it could be depending on the points that you get, it could be 4, 5, 6 paragraphs, and we are going to talk about how a paragraph is structured. Then after that, we have your conclusion. And once you have done that, you are ready to produce a draft and write the essay. But once you have produced a draft and written this essay, you might want to proofread to correct the mistakes, maybe give to a colleague of yours whom you think can better identify some of the issues in your essay, or alternatively, you can upload to my feedback at the University of East London. If you go on to the SharePoint, you will see on student links, you can see where it is written academic tutoring or study skills. If you click on that, it will take you to my feedback where you can upload your assignment, and it will be checked within 36 hours, and you are given your feedback. So that's the assignment planning process. If you put in place all those steps and you do them in a careful and a more rigorous manner, you should be able to produce an essay that is quite appropriate at your level, meaningful, and that will get a good grade. Now we want to go on to the next the next step. So at the planning stage, you might want to say you are looking at your introduction. You might want to adopt or decide on the position that you intend to take on a topic. You have read the whole topic widely, and then you want to now decide overall which position do I take. This assignment involves 3 models, right? I've read about them, and I have an idea what this means. So you might want to reflect which position might be useful in responding to this question. Do I say the medical model is useful, or it is the social model, or am I saying is it both models? So identify the main points that you are going to use to support that particular position, and make an arrangement of the points that you are going to use in a logical order so that they link and connect. And again, we talked about writing the supporting evidence for each of the particular point, give examples. You might want to put some statistics, the data, or refer to a research done. Okay, if we can go to the next slide. Right, now the next slide is the structuring of your essay, and we will start with the introduction. What do we put in an introduction? So an introduction is a succinct and precise brief text that you write at the beginning of your essay. What it does is it merely states the main issues that will be dealt with in the essay. If it is an argumentative essay like the one that we are reviewing now about or different understandings of autism, you need to outline what the main arguments are. You might also want to explain why they are important. And of course, here you realize there are differences in opinions. Why do you think those different opinions come about? And if there are some key terms that you might think need definition, you could do that in the introduction, depending on the nature of the topic. Or in this particular case, if you are dealing with a topic that needs extensive discussion, you might then want to leave the definition to your next paragraph, where you just outline what the key terms mean. For example, autism generally, what does it mean? What are its depiction? You might want to define words like disability. Yes, so those definitions should be put in the second paragraphs, because if you put them in the introduction, maybe you don't have enough space, because here in the introduction you are dealing with maximum 500 words. But then if it is an essay that is maybe just one keyword, you might want to put the definition in the introduction. It all depends, right? So in your introduction, you should, if possible, state what position you are taking in relation to the arguments that you have raised. And this position you are taking is called a thesis statement, because it is a summary of the arguments that you will be using, and which position you are inclined towards. And in the introductions, in the past, some students have raised whether you are required to reference. The position is, where you are referring to, or you are writing an essay that is experts that have had a significant influence on the topic, you need to mention them. For example, say you are talking of language development in children. Obviously, to situate your arguments appropriately, and also to show that you are knowledgeable, you might need to cite or associate the perspectives that you are writing with people like Noam Chomsky. If it is in attachment, experts like Baub and John Baub. If it is again language development, people like Vygotsky. So in the introduction, those might appear, but then there's no specific requirement for you then to go on and write the authors that have written about those ideas in the introduction. Mind you, this is just a summary of 500 words, and you are simply outlining how you are going to approach your essay. You are just giving us the issues you will be dealing with and the order that you will be dealing with those. Right. Are there any questions with regards to the introduction? Or some or the other issues that we have discussed before this, like the planning, how we go about researching and putting our ideas in order. Okay. If there are no questions, Terry, you want to ask? Yes, please go ahead.
Yes. Maybe we can elaborate on the one we're talking about, putting the definition in the introduction paragraph or in the second paragraph. I didn't get that part.
Okay. So in the introduction, normally you may want to define those words that you think might be interpreted differently. But then what I was saying is, if then you think in the essay, there are, say, 3, 4, 5 words that might need clarification, I would advise that instead of defining those in the introduction, move them to the next paragraph. Because if you try to define them in the introduction, they will take the whole space and you have no time and you have no space to look at other issues like summarizing your main arguments and putting your thesis statement. Is
Okay.
that clear?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, right. So you will see in the exemplar introductions that I have put how I have dealt with that. So if you can go to the next slide. Right. So these are examples of introductions. Now, right, this is a summary or an introduction to this particular essay that we are dealing with. So you can see here we have the medical model, the social model, and biopsychosocial models of that disability, the 3 of them. So let me give you time to read through this introduction. Can you see all the text? Because on my screen, part of the text is covered by the participant list. I'm not sure how we can move that. Right.
I have them on a separate screen, yeah, so it should be visible. Maybe just move it on yours, perhaps.
Okay, right. Yeah. So what you can do is, if part of your text is covered by participants, simply minimize the participant list. Right. So that's the whole introduction. I'll give you a minute or so to read through. Right. Now looking at that introduction, there are some things that I have done there. I have said because across these models, because across the models, there seems to be no common understanding and depiction of autism, right? So when I say this seems to be no common understanding, who can tell me the impact of using such words? There seems to be no common understanding, and why would that be necessary? As opposed for me to say there's no common understanding. Anyone who can respond to that? Right. So when I say there seems to be no common understanding, this is what we call hedging language, which means that I'm being cautious here rather than saying there's no common understanding. That is taking a bit of an absolute position because I have to be cautious because of course, there's some common understanding, but when you say there is no common understanding, it's an absolute position. But when you say there seems to be no common understanding, so your living room, there is no common understanding, but there could be some common understanding. So whenever we are arguing or reaching certain conclusions, we shouldn't reach those conclusions as all there is to the argument. But what we need to do is we need to couch our arguments in cautious language, which leaves room for other alternatives. For example, here, when we talk about the different models, if you were to argue solely based on the strengths of the medical model to say it is an appropriate model without leaving room, because obviously the medical model has some limitations as seen in the introduction. Therefore, when you are reaching your conclusion, if say you are in agreement with the medical model, you would maybe reach a conclusion like the medical oral evidence seems to suggest that the medical model is a useful model in managing children and young people with autism. So by so doing, you are leaving room for other alternatives because largely you think it's dominant. However, it is not the only model that that could be used. So be careful about that. Now let's go on and look at another introduction. Right. Can you see in that introduction, I have, because I'm simply dealing with attachment here, and in the introduction, I have given just a general definition of what attachment is. And again, because in the essay, there are these key experts that have influenced that have influenced developments or thinking in attachment. I have mentioned them by name. For example, I mentioned Bowlby there, Goldfarb, and Tizard. But you look at the previous slide, I didn't make any references there. So if I can give you a minute or so to go through that introduction as well. Right. Okay. Yeah. So as you can see, that introduction summarizes what the key issues are. But then, as you will see in our next slides, when you are writing a paragraph, any paragraph, there's a framework that is very popular, known as the PIL framework, where when you are introducing, you start with a topic sentence. You can see this paragraph of mine. The text in red is the topic sentences that really talks about the general, what the general paragraph is about, or what the whole essay is about. Then you can see in the middle paragraph, I put in, that's where the arguments are. You can see here I'm outlining who says what and what the agreements are, what are the disagreements are. Then this is followed by an evaluation and a conclusion. You can see where it says, this essay will go on to show how these ideas were challenged. Yeah, so that's part of my evaluation, which shows that the maternal deprivation hypothesis and the idea of monotropism are issues that have been challenged, and they are not as universally as universal as previously assumed. Then I reach my conclusion, which is in purple. And you are going to see we follow this framework when we structure the paragraphs. And we are now turning to discussing in detail this framework. If we can go to the next slide, please. Right. So when we structure paragraphs, the main things that we have to bear in mind is when you structure paragraph, you need to signpost and link ideas. And within those paragraphs, you need to critically analyze. And these are the issues now we are turning to. Right. Now, when you write an essay, these are some of the issues that you need to consider. So structuring your ideas sequentially, you have an introduction that outlines what the main issues are, and through the text, you need to make critical discussions and concluding by highlighting or reviewing the issues that have been discussed and what overall conclusions have been reached. So you do this when you write your essay, you are selecting the most theoretical perspective that are relevant to that particular topic. You examine them in detail. And when you are discussing the theories and perspectives, it is always important to consider the context, and you deal with one particular issue at a time. So each paragraph, they have a separate each particular theme or sub theme should have its own standalone paragraph. So when you are arguing or presenting arguments, you need to weigh up the conflicting evidence and adopt and evaluate these through adopting a position that you think is more compelling. And you might want to demonstrate why these differences are important, or why they have risen. It could be for philosophical reasons, or they could be contextual. But as you argue, try to make a fair and to make fair and balanced arguments and reach conclusions that are backed by credible evidence, and you then end by analyzing and reaching a particular position that you think is contextually appropriate, or it applies to your particular context. But then, as I indicated earlier, you might need to, as you make conclusion, you need to use what we call hedging language. What this means is you adopt a position, but then you don't take this position as absolute. You leave room for other alternative or competing arguments, because you are only reaching that conclusion considering your context. If another person in another context might reach a different conclusion. If we can go to the next slide. Right, now we talked about the PEEL framework. So what does this stand for? It stands for point, evidence, explanation and evaluation, and link. So I've shown you what a topic sentence does. It introduces an idea. When you introduce this idea, you then want to back it up, because an introduction needs to be backed, right? You have introduced an idea. You are sparking an argument. Then you need then to support what your assertion or what your claim is. So the topic sentence starts by making a claim. When you make a claim, it needs to be substantiated. You substantiate by evidence. This evidence is in the form of a reference, what experts say. You can then go on to give further information to give clarity to that idea by, say, giving another supporting sentence or giving an example. Then that might be followed maybe by an idea that challenges that position to show the plurality of ideas, and demonstrate that, and as a demonstration that experts don't agree on the particular issue and don't seem to view the issue from the same position or from the same context. Then this can be followed by an evaluation. So having given us alternative evidence, give us an evaluation of what you think the is an appropriate position or appropriate perspective to take, considering your context. Then you follow that by your concluding sentence, right? Now let's look at some of the, okay. Before we move on to exemplar paragraphs, here is a model to generate a critical thinking. So when you are evaluating a particular issue, you start by describing. So in the first sentence, the topic sentence, you give us what that theory is, who says what, and who supports. Then you might then go on to analyze why do these experts view the issue from that particular position? Who else has contributed to that particular issue or debates in that particular issue? How do they see things differently? Why do you think they see things differently? And if there are these differences, so what? Yeah. So, or you might want to, given these differences, or you are analyzing a particular theory and you think a particular perspective fits or addresses the challenges better. But then you might want to ask, what if, maybe what if the context changes? What if it is things change due to the movement of time? What next? So if there are these limitations, or if things might differ contextually, what next? So what next means, what are the implications, right? So this is a model that can be useful in critically evaluating ideas. And the table that is on the screen gives the different descriptions of critical writing as opposed to descriptive writing. So you might want to look at the slides. Those descriptors are the key skills that you need to focus on when you are writing critically. Right, let's go to the next slides. Right, again, when you write, signposting your ideas is quite important. For example, when you start a new paragraph, you could begin by giving reference to what you have discussed before. Like the previous discussion has highlighted the importance of appropriate behavior. In this section, the discussion focuses on this particular issue. And inside your paragraph, you also need to make sure your ideas are connected together by using connectives and conjunction words like however, alternatively, further to this, in spite of this. Next slide, please. Right, so that table, I will leave you to look at during your spare time. It indicates the various areas that you might want to use linking words. For example, when you do when you are going to the next step, those are the words that you might use for illustrations, for contrast, extension, and so forth. Next slide, please. Right, we've already talked about making judgments and the use of judging, the use of hedging language. I won't go into the detail because we've already discussed that. So the examples of hedging language, the texts, the evidence seems to suggest that, or it could be concluded that this might be an appropriate position and so forth. Now, let's quickly look at referencing, right? So those are the definitions of referencing and some key terms in referencing, and I won't go into detail, but then give you some highlights of what is important when you reference. If we can go to the next slide. Right, right. Those are examples of critical paragraphs. This, I think there was a mix-up here. This should have come before the referencing slide. You can read these on your own. You can see this critical evaluation, the conclusion, and yeah, those are the types of different types of different sections of a critical paragraph. Now, when you reach your conclusion, you of an essay, you need to demonstrate how you have answered the question, summarize the main arguments, and maybe where an essay asks you to take a position, state that position, or where you have put your thesis statement in the introduction, refer to this thesis statement. Sorry, there was an interference of because that slide on referencing should have come after we have dealt with that. Sorry for breaking the sequence. Right. Let's go on now to referencing. Right. Yeah. Okay. Next slide, please. Yeah. Next slide. Right. So when we reference, we are using books, textbooks, and journals, and I have already referred to that. So the reasons why we reference is at university level, we when we write essays, we are doing that systematically. We are not simply throwing in ideas. And there are certain conventions or rules that are followed. These rules relate to how we structure ideas, how we signpost, and referencing is part of these rules. When we are referencing, we are citing or we are referring to experts that have done research or written about these ideas in order to support the claims that we are making. Referencing makes our work credible because people are likely to believe us if you are citing credible authors. Our work is likely to carry more weight if it is supported by ideas of experts that have researched these issues or experts who have considered these issues at great length. Next slide. Right. So we reference in order to avoid plagiarism, and plagiarism is taking ideas, other people's ideas, and using them with without acknowledging. So it's a form of theft, and it's an unacceptable habit. And the plagiarism can present itself in the form of copying ideas word for word without acknowledging where these come from, or failing, or where we put these ideas in our own words. If we fail to acknowledge, it's again plagiarism, or the idea of just changing a few words and claiming that the work is your own. Right, next slide. Right, we will skip that. You can read that on your own. Now, right, yeah, we can skip that as well, but do those activities when you get some free time. We can skip that as well. Right, now, right, if you can go on, yeah, these are just stages in summary making, paraphrasing, which these are basic skills that you would have done. And if you are not aware of how to do that, I encourage you to read these slides, but then we want now to just focus on how we reference. If you can go to the next slide. Next one as well. Those are summary skills. The next one, yeah. So when say you are using or citing one author to support an idea or to support your position, you would begin, for example, McCulloch, open brackets, 2018 close bracket, claims that. So you are putting the author in the signal phrase at the beginning, but there is another alternative way of doing it as well, which we'll see in the next slide, where you simply write the statement and you put the details of the author and the year that author published the particular text at the end. If you can go to the next slide, please. Right, so that's the second method. You can see you present your idea, then at the end put the reference. Next slide. right? Where you cite directly, this needs to be put in single quotation marks, and you put the page number. For example, the way I've presented it, there we put the page number to indicate where that quotation came from. Right now, there are some issues around citations. When you are citing, you shouldn't use many words, because then that will be a sign that you have not understood the text. So quotations should be restricted to just a few words, a phrase where you think the writer expresses the idea better. But then if you put a whole sentence as a quotation, that may not be acceptable unless it's a large piece of work like a dissertation. Okay, next slide. Right, now where you are citing 3 authors, you need to list all the 3, but from 4 authors, you can just now use et al, which means and others. If we can go to the next slide. Right. You may come across where you are citing a document that is no identifiable author. For example, you are reading a policy document from the Department for Education, and there's no writer that is mentioned. In that case, the Department for Education becomes the author. So it's called a corporate author. If we can go to the next slide. Now I will deal with secondary referencing before we finish. I realize our time is gone. I will show you how to secondary reference. Yeah, if we can go ahead, some of those you can read on your own. Right. Yeah, next slide. Right. So if you can see in that text, you would find the textbook has been written by Gabriel, but Gabriel inside this text quotes Foucault. So the way how you present the ideas that say you take from this page is you say Foucault because the ideas came from Foucault. Foucault, open bracket, 1988, comma, cited in Gabriel, comma, 2017, close bracket, claims that, or write the whole statement. Then at the end, you write Foucault, 1988, cited in Gabriel, 2017, and close bracket. Right, now let's look at how we write references. Right, so where you are writing references for a textbook, so it's the author's surname and the initials, year of publication, book title in italics, place of publication, and publisher. And I've presented an example there. The journal, again, that's an example of a journal. It starts with author, year of publication, title in single quotation marks, title of the journal in italics, volume and issue number, page numbers. You can see the examples in green. And for a website, it's author surname, initial, year of publication, title in italics, then full stop, available at. You simply copy the URL or uniform resource locator and paste it after available at, like as presented in the text in purple. Now, that's how you present your references. Let's see how the reference list will look like. Okay, so that's an example of a reference list. So it's arranged all in alphabetical order, starting with the surnames of the authors. Okay, are there any questions so far on what we have discussed in this session? Sorry, I had to quickly rush through because there were so many things to cover in this session. Hopefully, I was clear enough and you were able to grasp the main issues that were important in this session. If there are any questions, please feel free to
Sarah is
present.
asking Johannes about a reference older than 10 years. Generally, just to mention, and I'm sure Johannes, you'd agree, it's if you use older references, it can be fine. But if you only use very old references, usually if you use older references, they're because they're classic or because they're a purpose. You should be using relatively recent ones. But it does depend on the context. So if I'm speaking about a piece of legislation that's 20 years old, it could be that that's very relevant. But, you know, journal articles, using journal articles and are a very good way of getting the latest up-to-date information. You know, if you're researching definitions of dyslexia, a good tip is always to, you know, go for a review article, for example, because that will condense or review all of the information on a particular topic. So if you get a recent review article, you'll all have very current references, but it's not written in stone. Sure, it isn't.
Yeah, maybe to add on to what Deidre is said, older references are acceptable, but on certain conditions. Let's say you are citing the work of an expert like Vygotsky. Although it is published, it has been, the publication is quite dated, but the Vygotsky is contributed and his ideas have been influential in the field of education. So it might be acceptable to cite Vygotsky or Piaget, but then include also alongside that reference some latest views on their ideas from a latest publication, because then that counterbalances the age of those ideas, because then what you are demonstrating is you are saying these are experts that have defined or influenced the field, but then also these are the latest views on the developments of their theories. That's why it's always advisable to multiple reference. You can see from my previous slides that I multiple reference, I put 2-3 references. So if say you cite a reference that is more than 10 years, then alongside it include another one that is that is recent. Okay.
Good advice. Thank you.
Yeah, let me look. Are there any questions? I'm not able to access the chat box. Let me. Are there any other questions?
No, I think you've covered it there. I think Ivona is saying that you'll need to digest it afterwards. I think you have covered so much. And the wonderful thing is the session is recorded and you'll receive, you know, the presentation, a copy of that as well. So you'll be able to go through it in your own time. And just to say that in addition to all of this information, there is also on the website, on your homepage in Moodle, you will find a lot of guides and resources, and there's Cite 'em Right, and there's all sorts of UEL resources as well, so to support you. And if you have specific questions relating to your assignment and referencing or anything like that, it's also open to you to email your tutor directly. So just to say that, and also to book an individual session with the academic writing team. Isn't that right, Johannes? We can book in those individual sessions. They're also available.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Yeah, all the links are in these slides. Unfortunately, I don't want to take much of your time, but if you go through the slides, you will see how to book in for drop-in sessions, either,
Great.
if be in person or online. Yeah, of
Yeah.
course, online might be convenient for you, and these
Yeah.
are available Monday to Friday. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm just checking now to see if there's any more messages there. I think everybody
Leslie, thank
has
you.
don't think there's any more questions.
No,
No. Thank you so much, Johannes. As always, it's a pleasure. You're so expert at this. We really appreciate your time, and we appreciate everybody pitching up this evening. And we know you're all busy and have busy lives and work lives and family commitments. I hope you found it helpful. Please do, look, take the time to digest the information, save it as a resource, and refer to it. And you won't I think you'll reap the benefits when it comes to writing your assignment. And just know that we're here to support you. Your tutors are also here to support you. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions, or if you need a session with myself or any of the team, to offer you support. Okay. Thank you so much.
thanks everyone.